Hello everyone, my name is Lindsay Jamerson and I am a graduating senior studying Peace and Conflict Studies with minors in History and Political Science. I recently had the opportunity to present this presentation under the same name, Myanmar's Religious and Ethnic Conflict, at the 6th Annual Peace and Conflict Resolution Conference in Thailand with the support of the Undergraduate Research and Creativity Office. In this presentation, I will be giving a revised version of the one in Thailand. If you would like to read the full paper, please click the link in the description bar down below. The submitted abstract is as follows. This case study analyzes the Rohingya ethnic cleansing and investigates the current conflict while explaining more complex questions involving the crisis. This is done by describing and addressing its escalation. The framework used to support this analysis is Christopher Mitchell's Spitzer. By using this framework as a guide to analysis, it is conclusive that the Rohingya people are being systematically abused as a result of historical oppression and European imperialism. Myanmar is a hotbed for human rights activism and conflict analysis, with more than 900,000 Rohingya refugees fleeing Myanmar since March 2019. Since 2012, systematic religious persecution has been exacted on the minority Muslims by a majority Buddhist government, which will be analyzed in this case study. To understand any conflict, one must first go to the source. In the case of Myanmar, the conflict can be traced as far back as 1784. The Rohingyas, who originated from the Muslim kingdom of Arakan, were conquered and absorbed by the Buddhist kingdom of Burma. Burma was then colonized by Great Britain in 1824 and stayed under colonial rule until 1937. During nearly a century of colonial rule, there was massive immigration of different people with different cultural and religious identities. This mass flux of people intensified the pre-existing tensions between the indigenous religious groups because of the pressure to conform to Western ideals and customs. Japan retained control of Burma during World War II, which drove many Rohingya out of the Rakhine territory. However, in 1984, Burma became independent and the tensions between the two groups increased exponentially. A few years later, in 1963, the Burma Socialist Party seized power and disassembled the Rakhine state. In 1977, a national census, later used as the foundational claim for the exclusion of the Rohingyas, was distributed. Drawing from this data, citizen scrutiny cards were introduced to display racial purification. These policies are similar to the policies in place during apartheid in South Africa and in Nazi-era Germany, including sanctioned racial segregation and political and economic discrimination against the minority. Of the many theories that can be applied, the most relevant is the social identity theory. Social identity theory was developed by Henry Tajfel to explain the relationship between the in-groups and the out-groups. The theory states that in order for the member of an in-group to be able to hate or dislike an out-group or discriminate against it, they must first have acquired a sense of belonging to a group, which is clearly distinct from the one that they hate, dislike, or discriminate against. In this case, the in-group, the Buddhists, are discriminating against the out-group, the Muslims, and more specifically the Rohingyas. This dynamic has created a power imbalance imposed through religious identity and consequently has created a means for justification of persecution. This conflict is multi-partied, involving institutions and organizations as well as government bodies. The United Nations is embroiled in this conflict as they have the responsibility to protect all human rights and aid in the defense of those being persecuted, per United Nations Human Rights Doctrine. Consequently, all member states of the United Nations also bear part of the responsibility for this conflict. Additionally, Myanmar's government officials have failed the Rohingya people and have been instrumental in the structural and direct violence the Rohingya have endured. This began with the 1982 Citizenship Law of Myanmar, which was the first legal document that rendered the Rohingya stateless, and has served as a precedent defending discriminatory policies. The proposed intervention model for the Rohingya crisis involves conceptualizing, planning, and monitoring how a value-based and principled, conflict-sensitive approach to humanitarian assistance could contribute to longer-term social transformation goals. By focusing on needs assessment and practical planning, including existing intervention proposals, and integrating all levels of actors into the model, an effective intervention model can be created. In simplest terms, successful intervention will include ending all active military operations in Myanmar, committing to needs assessment, encouraging negotiation of ceasefire and peace agreements, empowering the Rohingya people and providing means for their return to the Rakhine state, and granting the Rohingya people full citizenship. This will allow for the methodical confrontation of ethnic cleansing and the transformation and prevention of future occurrences. Although there is no end in sight, there is still hope for the dwindling Rohingya population and justice for the Buddhist government. This guided analysis opens the door for deeper investigation of conflict and explains some of the more complex questions involving the Rohingya crisis. Thank you all for listening to a brief portion of my presentation, and I hope that you will continue your efforts of understanding this conflict by reading the remainder of my